I am yet again honored to have and I'm proud to say, my good friend, my new best friend, Charles Ortel, Wall Street investor, absolute sapient pate of all that is financial in that world, but the consummate expert in one particular area, and we'll get into this right away, of the Hillary Clinton, dare I say, crime family, and think of this almost as an indictment. We all have our favorite Hillary Clinton problem. Her book, What Happened, or I prefer to say it in the Desi Arnaz version, What Happened? But that's me. Rather than focus on this, what Charles has explained to me, and you of note, and I have been so happy to know this, is that the Clinton Foundation, we'll get into this right away, the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Health Access Initiative, and others, the charitable aspect, quote unquote, of the Clinton crime family, which it seems at first, when you tell people this, they go, oh, well, okay. No, this could be to the Clintons what tax evasion was to Al Capone. With that, Charles Ortel, my good friend, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Lionel, for having me on.
Let us, and I want everybody to go back and watch the old videos. We're not going to go from square one. What is the latest that should keep Madam Hillary Rodham Felon, the oven mitt fashionista, awake at night?
Well, while I'm answering this question, perhaps, I know you're very musical and very much involved with show business, an Emmy winner, I believe. So no doubt you've heard the great singer John Mayer, who is, I don't think, a Trump man or a Republican. He has a great song called Gravity, and I won't try to sing it. But while I'm answering this question, I want you, in the back of your mind, the audience, to imagine that instead of singing Gravity, John Mayer is singing Charity, right? Just put that in the back of your mind. So the latest and greatest, I think, is there's been a lot of hubbub over whether or not Robert Mueller is conducting a fair investigation into the whole possibility that the Russians may have been involved in the 2015-16 election time period. There hasn't been enough scrutiny, in my view, on who Robert Mueller is, what his ties to James Comey might be, what his ties to Rod Rosenstein might be, and why is this all related to the Clinton Foundation? Now, the answer is, when you go back into the history of the Clinton Foundation, you realize that, in the same way that Trump is beginning his presidency under an investigation, when Clinton left, he began his post-presidency under an investigation. So beginning in February of 2001, there was, not a matter. There wasn't, just like a ham-handed inquiry. There was a full-blown, straight-up, impaneled grand jury, FBI investigation coordinated with the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District and maybe in other districts that began in February 2001, at first under the direction of Mary Jo White. And then a man who figures now in the mix, James Comey, towards the end of 2001, replaced Mary Jo White as the sitting U.S. attorney. And the head of the FBI on September 4th, 2001, was none other than Robert Mueller. So these people, and I think somewhere along the way, Rod Rosenstein was U.S. attorney in Maryland, right the way through to the very recent past. Somehow this august group, and I believe actually in the line people in the FBI, that there are a lot of very smart people there, line people in the IRS, et cetera, they understand fraud when they see it. And they had access to the Clinton Foundation, in quotes, books, because in this entire time frame, all the while our money was being spent investigating what may have happened at the Clinton Foundation, they didn't bother to notice that nobody, as Jackie Gleason would say, nobody had ever produced an actual, real, legally compliant audit. And it's not like it's a gray area. It's not like experts don't understand the difference between a fake audit and a real audit. There never was a real audit produced in this period. So how does the FBI mount an investigation, not for 1 year or two or 3, but for 4 years and not notice that none of the books and records of the Clinton Foundation had been audited just at the same time as this thing was being put together and tens of millions of dollars were being solicited? How did they not notice that governments were being contacted for money, but that in the IRS forms where it lists out government contributions, in none of those years, in fact, in no year until 2008, is the line filled in on the Clinton Foundation showing any government contributions of any kind. In none of the state forms is it. How did they miss all of this? And why did they miss all of this? And why has it been allowed to stand for so long? My suspicion, Lionel, and your viewers, is that this has something to do, this must have something to do with possible scandals on the Republican side as well. Now, what possible scandals were going along exactly during this time frame? One set of scandals had to do with Enron. Now, the Enron, bankruptcy and all that began to play out late in 2001. Beginning of the end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter of 2001, the bankruptcy, I believe, occurred, I want to say, in December of 2001. And it took a fair amount of time to actually bring the various criminal and civil matters across the finish line. Indeed, a number of these didn't even start until after the 2004 election. So I think, what we're seeing here is that when you look into the actual books and record, it doesn't take a PhD, it doesn't even take an MBA or a college graduate to look at the record that's out there and say there was massive fraud here. That in fact, between around August 31, 2004, when the FBI vault file records clearly show that the team was ready to go, but instead of going and prosecuting the Clinton Foundation, the dogs were called off August 31st, September 1st, 2004, right around the time I believe that Bill Clinton had a medical emergency.
Now, for the dense, for those who do not see the world perhaps as clear as you, what does Enron have to do with anything? Why would an audit or an investigation in any way have compromised either those peripherally or tangentially connected with Enron?
Well, I can't do the voice, but I'm sure you know the actor Gilbert Gottfried.
Yes.
From, I think was it?
Affleck.
Yeah, and Beverly Hills Cop. Let's say on the one hand, you have a scandal over here involving the Bushes, and on the other hand, you have a scandal over here involving the Clintons. Could you see your way clear to make it both go away? I could imagine that something like that might have happened in the days leading up to the 2004 election.
May I also add, there is something which I always think, because of the interconnectivity of this racketeering organization, if you will, someone somewhere would say, listen, Ortel, don't go there. If you go there, we're going to go here. And there's a lot of people who are connected with all of this who would really not appreciate you doing this, up to and including Gates Foundation. I'm just throwing names out. Rockefellers, Fords. But two things. Number one, explain how, in case somebody's listening and they're saying, I don't get it. This sounds like some kind of a little pro forma thing. You have a little charity. You didn't have an audit. Do an audit later. It's you hear all the times about, especially now with charities involving Irma and Harvey, and sometimes, I mean, we're used to charities sometimes failing to provide their eleemosynary or philanthropic goals. How serious is it to commit charitable fraud? And number two, how unbelievably glaring is the mistake not to have an audit? The audit is the only place you can start. You can't even investigate anything without step A being the audit.
Well, for ordinary human beings whose last name is not Clinton, and maybe, dare I say, Bush and Obama as well, for ordinary mortals like former Representative Corinne Brown, who was convicted earlier this year of 19, I believe, felony counts of charity fraud involving an $800,000 alleged slush fund operated over, I think, 3 or 4 years or so. For Corinne Brown, That small offense, 800,000 over, raising in theory 800,000 and using the money for personal enrichment and campaign purposes illegally, that small offense could, depending on how the judge rules, could send her away for the rest of her life. And she's the same age as Hillary Clinton. She was running for office, a lesser position, but running for office nonetheless, try to get a special redistricting seat in Florida, in your home state. She's going to be sentenced, I believe, by November. So for ordinary mortals, the IRS takes, in theory, the offense of saying you're going to raise the money for one charitable purpose, but even if you diverted it to a different charitable purpose, they would put you, good one. They'd put you in jail for that potentially. But you certainly cannot use a charity as an inbox for crooked people around the world who see that getting on the right side of the Clintons can be a good step, looking at the long history of the Clintons in Arkansas, and then later when they were in the White House and she was in the Senate, she was Secretary of State. They see a long time track record here of send money the Clintons' way and you'll be better off. Send money the Clintons' way and you might not get prosecuted for a serious offense, or your offense will be lessened. Send money the Clintons' way. They'll use their influence in the UN and the World Bank and the IFC to route you tremendous amounts of money. They could see all that, and the IRS, it's like they're willingly deaf, dumb, and blind. I mean, I first wrote an article about this for Breitbart, March 16th, 2015. That's 2.5 years ago. And, last year, Marsha Blackburn, who was a wonderful human being, representative in Congress, sent a letter to the IRS demanding an investigation. They treated her, I would say, with incredible disrespect. The person who treated her with disrespect in the tax-exempt department, I think, is still the acting head of the tax-exempt department. What's so complicated about understanding that if your trustees, as is in the case of the Clinton Foundation, actually, and I'll break some news with you, the trustees of the Clinton Foundation aren't even the real people that are in the tax forms. They have been hiding from the general public that they created let me get this right, in November of 2013, they changed the way in which the Clinton Foundation was governed. They didn't, in fact, bring in outsiders. They brought in patsies, people who had agreed to be subordinate Class B directors with no real power, and then they concentrated control of the Clinton Foundation and Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea for life, which you can't do in a public charity. You're not allowed to do that. It has to be representative of the public at large. And they hid all that while they were raising their endowment, while they were raising funds. And, so then they bring in, I would argue, a crooked accounting firm, Price Waterhouse. They should know better. They brought in a crooked office of a crooked accounting firm, Price Waterhouse, that for multiple years now has not been able to see the obvious. And you wonder why. And remember, these are the same people who got the Academy Awards wrong. I think the chairman of Price Waterhouse has been too busy hobnobbing with celebrities and trying to curry favor with celebrities instead of having accountants do their real work here. And the real work, any accountant worth his or her salt understands that you can't start with a charity that has been mismanaged from the beginning, that doesn't have its forms proper, and say, all right, well, forget about the past. Let bygones be bygones. We'll just pick the story up December 31st, 2009, ignore the past, and we'll try to make everything in the future right. You can't do that. It doesn't work mathematically.
Now,
you have to start.
I'm sorry. One thing, in case somebody is listening for the first time, and again, I implore, I beseechingly entreat you to go back and listen to my prior incredible conversations with Charles Ortel. CharlesOrtel.com. All of the information as to how to get a hold of you is included in this particular one. But when the only charity that has ever been organized, signed, chartered, the only, or domestic, whatever it is to create the William Jefferson Clinton Library, correct? The Presidential Library, that's it. Is that correct?
Well, all right, so this is not like giving birth to a child. This is when you set up a charity, what you receive at first from the IRS is a conditional federal exemption from taxation. It is not a unilateral, the IRS looks at your paperwork, looks at your answers to any follow-up questions, and says, okay, Lionel, on the basis that what you gave me is true, accurate, and complete, that there are no material omissions, as of the date I'm going to now grant you this conditional authorization, retroactive to a certain date, assuming that all that you told me was true, you have this authority to solicit donations on the basis that donors could take tax deductions against their federal income taxes. Okay? But if what you told me is false, materially false, and if what you told me is not complete, and if what you told me omits a material fact, at any point in the future, 50 years from now, I can go back and say, well, I didn't know this. You didn't tell me that you lied under oath, had your law licenses removed, solicited funds using an illegal fundraiser in multiple states, didn't fill out your first year's tax return. You didn't tell me any of that. And you can go back and retroactively revoke the authority for this thing to be a charity. Now, when they applied to be a charity, they actually applied as the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. And it is crystal clear that the intent of this foundation was to raise the money required to construct a presidential records repository in Little Rock and a related research facility, and also to raise the money for the required endowment. That was the purpose. No other purposes, and there's a distinction between purposes and activities. No other purposes, uppercase P, were authorized by the IRS as being federally tax exempt. So you can't go and say, all right, I'm going to create this presidential archive and research facility in Little Rock, and the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to fight HIV/AIDS in Africa. You can't do that.
And you can't do something that most of us would applaud. The William Jefferson Clinton Library Foundation cannot say, those people in Florida and whatever, they need our help with our, we're going to, and in addition to the law, send us your money and we'll help them. Now that sounds laudable, it sounds commendable, it sounds philanthropic. That is a violation. If you want to do that, you have to have, correct me if I'm wrong, another charity. You cannot. The IRS, the law, knows nothing about the worth of some extraneous extracurricular goal or focus of the charity. It only knows this is not about raising money and funds for this library. And just to let people know, this initial library fund, there's Clinton Global Initiative, Clinton Health Access Initiative. Are they part of the same foundation rubric or umbrella, or are they separate? Are they correct? Because we're looking at roughly $100 billion, maybe total, who knows, without an audit, over these years. And it's that huge, and how this has been missed by everyone else, worrying about her. Abedin and Anthony Weiner and the Servergate, who cares about that? I'm sorry, pay for play? Okay, you can argue. This is the Capone moment.
Right, because, I'll answer your question. The short answer to the question is that all the other initiatives that you talked about are unlawfully created and unlawfully validated in the beginning by Lois Lerner's department when she was there.
Who was just let off the hook, by the way. She is not going to be prosecuted for theoretically targeting conservative organizations for audit and examination.
But bring your mind back, if you will, to August 31, 2004, prior to the George W. Bush re-election contest against John Kerry. Between August 31, 2004 and November 18, 2004, the Clinton Foundation, I believe, defrauded the National Archives and the people of the United States, negotiating what is called a joint use and operating agreement that is omitted from the Clinton Foundation website, which associates of mine have found, and we've been studying now for a while. And when you read that agreement, which was cautiously drafted on our behalf by some set of lawyers, appreciate it was signed on the very day the thing was open. And on the day they signed it, they knowingly, that is to say the Clinton Presidential Foundation, they knowingly defrauded we the people by claiming that they were a validly organized and operated foundation on that date when they weren't. They had begun the illegal attempt to fight HIV/AIDS internationally prior to then, well prior to then, without disclosing it in their paperwork. They claimed, on the other hand, that they had done that. They were validly organized and operated. And more important, they claimed that they would remain validly operated and organized through the life of a 100-year lease, 98 years remaining at the time they signed it. So they basically they ordered up, extra weapons left over from Iran-Contra. They put the grenades into the warehouse. They had somebody pull a pin, and then they just ate a whole bunch of grenades. And ever since then, to hide the potential explosion, they've just been keeping this agreement outside their papers. But when you look at the papers, you see very clearly that A, they defrauded and misrepresented to the National Archives the true condition of their own presidential foundation, and B, I'll break some more news, I believe they stole at least $62 million in that year, in 2004, by engaging in deceptive accounting practices. Getting back to this audit, they did not produce a cash flow statement, which is required. A cash flow statement for the technicians out there checks what really happened, the movement into cash. If you produce a cash flow statement, it must reconcile with the income statement and the balance sheet. If you fail to produce a cash flow statement, you can think, the uninitiated, that you're going to disguise the diversion I'm talking about. People like me and others know how to create a cash flow statement from a balance sheet, from an income statement, and I have conclusively proved that at least $62 million was stolen in that year. Now, why do I say $62 million? The reason is, at least, going back to the question of an audit, if you and I were to create the Lionel Presidential Foundation, we were crooked, our alter ego, and let's say, given your enormous reputation, $1 billion would go to you the first year. If we were crooked, we could say, you know what, we did a really great job, Lionel, don't you think? We're 50-50 partners in this. We raised $50 million. You look at me and say, no, we raised $1 billion. No, we raised $50 million. I've got an auditor over here who will give us a crooked audit on the 50, and I've got Swiss bankers over here who will take $475 for you and $475 for me, and we'll be living large. That's the essence of charity fraud. It's not what's in the books. It's what isn't in the book. And when you see for this length of time, so many trustees, so many professional firms, so many donors, so many of whom are very smart, not seeing this, you know that this is not simply about the Clinton Foundation. This is to use Hillary's word, a vast, left-leaning, crooked charity fraud conspiracy where people around the world, and in particular foreign people, have been using the Clinton family and using this structure as a way to purchase influence inside the United States of America, to get our government to either give them contracts of benefit, give them financing of benefit, or lay off on prosecution. That's what this thing has been used for ever since October 23rd, 1997. And if you think back to the birth of the Clinton Foundation, that is precisely when the Clinton family were in deep trouble, right? They had lost their ability to raise money for the first presidential expense trust because Charlie Tree's existence and role possibly funding foreign money illegally to that first trust had become known. They had lost their attempt to stop the Paula Jones lawsuit from going forward and the discovery related thereto. So their legal woes were increasing. Their bills were mounting. They were heading towards an impeachment trial. They had no way of raising money. Hillary couldn't work. She had to be a first lady. Bill obviously couldn't make money higher than the very low compensation the president got in those years. I want to say it was like $200,000, not even $450 or whatever it is now. So they were in deep trouble, and this foundation, born in trouble, has been mismanaged from the beginning, I would argue, willfully and purposefully, only to escalate and escalate and escalate, and to the point now where you got to ask yourself, it's Constitution Day, and happy Constitution Day to you, Lyle. On Constitution Day, Donald Trump, has been president now for what, 8 months almost, and what is going on here? what you mentioned, Lois Lerner. I mean, how do you let Lois Lerner off the hook? How does Donald Trump's Justice Department let Lois Lerner off the hook when it's obvious to me that, I mean, her whole life, professional life, has been a lie. In the General Counsel of the Federal Election Commission, targeting political opponents. Then into the IRS, targeting conservatives. Then claiming, giving a speech before Congress that she's innocent, and then claiming the fifth. And all these stories we've heard about conservatives being targeted under her watch, all the missing records, alias email accounts. I mean, all of this stuff under her watch, if Donald Trump is president, what is Donald Trump doing at this point? It's ridiculous.
Well, we're wondering, and a lot of folks are wondering, by not only that, but is this a new MO of his? Teaming with, making a deal with the Democrat. This has nothing to do with the Clintons per se, or the Clinton Foundation, but dealing with the Democrats, not even having a Republican president, and making these deals about either immigration or whatever it was, this DACA and what have you. Then there's been some rumors today, though they deny it, that he's reneging on his Paris Agreement. So you're wondering right now, in addition to what you're saying, is he going through some type? Did they get to him? Did somebody sit down and say, "Let me explain to you how this works"? There are no sides. There is no Hillary and Bush. It's us, all of us. You're going to let this go away, and you're not going to pursue this. You got it? Or else we're going to show you whatever.
Well, let me say, first of all, I think on the question of the Paris Accord withdrawal, the White House has confirmed that they did indeed withdraw, and that the Wall Street Journal story, yet another Wall Street Journal story of recent weeks, is wrong, flat wrong. So that on that one. On the question of why isn't the IRS moving, my understanding is that, of the various government organizations, the one that supposedly is insulated from politics, supposedly, is the IRS for obvious reasons, and that therefore are not that many political appointments within the IRS. But that said, John Koskinen was nearly impeached before the election. I mean, the Congress was so outraged at his behavior and what was going on with Lerner. John Koskinen remains the head of the IRS right now, and his term is up, I believe, November 12th. So it could be that the Trump administration is saying with regard to him, we'll just let him run out his term, and then we'll appoint a replacement. And then we don't get into the area of, Donald Trump is firing the head of the IRS because they're auditing his tax return. You can imagine they might be thinking that. But as far as the acting head of the tax-exempt organization, and mind you, this tax-exempt organization department is very, very important. It is, some would estimate that the big definition, most expansive definition of the charitable sector puts it at 12, 15, 16% of the whole U.S. economy. It's a couple trillion a year. And this would be the person who sits on top of that whole effort to regulate that area. It's a crucial appointment. That's been an acting person now for a while, and you would have thought they could replace that person. And with regard to justice, I'm told that more senior people, there are 17 people, I believe, on Mueller's independent counsel staff, and fewer than that have been inserted in Donald Trump's Justice Department yet to oversee a vast bureaucracy. So, I mean, I would implore Donald Trump to, redouble his efforts to get people in and remove these holdovers. And it's not simply Obama holdovers. It's Obama, Bush, Clinton holdovers. Right. It goes all the way back, maybe even to 1988, 1986. A lot of people who came in as career, are they really career, or have they been, secretly very political? So, to drain the swamp, we need to do that. Another point I would make is, it seems that even under Donald Trump's administration, that the Barack Obama Foundation was in the news last week, and there'll be some stories coming out shortly on this. Barack Obama's foundation seems to be emulating the worst excesses of the Clinton Foundation. They're up to the same trick. It's so disappointing. And here, I'm not going to say who it is, but I met somebody who's on the board. He's definitely a partisan towards Obama, but he's a finance guy, and I've interacted with him and found him to be very fair and reasonable in my dealings with him. And in the green room over at Fox, I said to him, I said, look, he asked me why I was there. I told him about the Clinton stuff. And he said, well, I'm on the board of the Obama Foundation. And I said, well, you don't understand how big your problems are. He said, what are you talking about? So I sent him a heads up. And they're not listening. I mean, the Obama Foundation was established, I would argue, illegally. You know, its purposes are too general. They are not specific as is required by law. They sort of said that they were going to create as their primary purpose a presidential library. In subsequent releases, they've made contradictory assertions. In one case, they've said that they're not going to house any records. Well, you can't be a presidential library unless you all the records. You can't.
That kind of defeats the purpose of a library per se. Charles Ortel, is there not a state government component to this as well? Do state attorneys general or whatever their version of the DOJ is, don't they have an interest, assuming the feds were to punt on this?
Well, absolutely, and it's a great question, Lionel. So in most states, some states do not have income taxes, and some states choose not to regulate charities. But in, I believe, 45 plus states out of the 50, not 57, and in D.C., and in certain cities as well, there are regulations concerning soliciting for charities that you have to satisfy before you even try to raise money. And then there are regulations and forms that have to be filled out if you want to try to get donors in those places to be able to avail themselves of deductions in those jurisdictions. So typically in the high state tax places like New York, California, Illinois, Washington, D.C. even, there are very strict regulations concerning soliciting. And I'll make some more news with you. I believe in the overnight, Donald Trump is quoted as endorsing the Attorney General of Michigan in his quest to become governor. He's term limited, I think, as Attorney General, or for some reason he's going to run for governor. And on your broadcast, I will now demand that the Attorney General of Michigan do his job. I have copies of the Clinton Foundation tax forms in Michigan. They are false and materially misleading. They have raised money on the basis of false declarations about their activities, false accounting, repeatedly. They have failed to disclose the fact that their fundraisers, one fundraiser was disciplined for soliciting in multiple states without registering at a time the Clinton Foundation wasn't registered. They have failed to disclose the fact that the Clinton Foundation was disciplined 3 times. They've only told them about 1 time, but 3 times in Mississippi. They have failed to disclose defects in their international filings. And here's the sitting Attorney General of Michigan, just one of the 50 states. I mean, he could do something. He could pull a lever and say, I want to know. I demand to see the whole record here, and I demand to understand why you've come into my state, you've raised money on false pretenses, you haven't told the truth, you're defrauding our taxpayers. Other states may not do anything about it, but I'm going to do something about it. And if he isn't going to do something about it, I want to know why, because I'm not sure he should be the next governor of Michigan. And so you're right, Lionel. State by state, this process needs to be investigated.
And that's also not subject to pardon. The president cannot pardon somebody on a state charge. So let's assume Trump were to go completely off the rails and decide to pardon Hillary Clinton. It won't work for a state. Next question. Without, of course, you're not going to, but without revealing your sources, what you have been tirelessly culling and collating and accumulating and amassing more documents. You've talked to more people from so many strata of the charitable world, federal, local, international. Can you tell us anything is being done? Anybody is close to it? Anything that you know of or that you can tell us?
That's a good question. What I can say is less than what I know, but what I can say is that the places where I had hoped to make the most success are where I have been able to open investigations in process. So internationally, in countries that are large, in countries that have nuclear arsenals, in countries that therefore cannot be trifled with, in countries that have either directly or indirectly given more than $100 million to the Clinton Foundation, in countries where former leaders may have decided it might be fun to emulate the practice of setting up foundations and then living large off the proceeds of donations that may or may not have made it all the way to these foundations. In multiple countries, investigations are in process. Now, whether they will ultimately result in anything happening is another question. The way I believe this works is, first of all, people talk about wanting to make headlines with big investigations, but in practice, as you pointed out in the beginning of the show, all of these big politicians on either side or across the spectrum in individual countries, all of them have problems and all of them have opportunities. So when you join in battle, accommodations can get made. But in this case, what I'm hoping is this isn't about making money. This is the opposite of that. This is about charity. And people around the world have different ideas about charity. In the United States, we encourage charity. In Europe, they don't. In Europe, they believe in the main that the governments and religious entities, they're the ones involved in charity. Why do you need a charity? And so there's less charitable activity outside the United States in certain countries. But when you start thinking about what this charity said it was going to do and what it may have done, when you think that Ira Magaziner, a person who, looking at his record, has achieved many high honors, but has a reputation for being abrasive, arrogant, sloppy, and just a partisan operative. When you think about this HIV/AIDS stuff and the possibility that for now, how many years it is, 15 years, that this operation may have been unregulated, may have been unauthorized, may have been soliciting more money than it actually used for the stated purpose, that the drugs that may have been purchased could have actually been harmful and killed people. When you think that this may have happened in the most vulnerable places on Earth, with the poorest people on Earth, in places like Haiti, places like Papua New Guinea, places across Africa, and poor parts of Asia, when you think about that, it wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just like one time and let's forget about it. This has been going on for 15 years. I would hope that the people who are gathering this week here in New York, all these leaders who are coming to eat expensive food, to appear at the UN General Assembly and stay in fancy hotel rooms and hang around with celebrities. All these people are going to give the windbag speeches, the stem winders, the General Assembly. I would hope that both the people who run these poor countries and are coming here cap in hand looking for more aid dollars that might get stolen, and the donor countries, who I think in most donor countries are not feeling rich at the moment, for one reason or another, we've all got our financial. I would hope that those people would be able to listen up. And in particular, Lionel, I don't know if you had a chance, I think I sent it to you this morning, Jeanine Pirro's opening from last night, which will be replayed tonight. It's about 6 or 8 minutes long. Jeanine Pirro has taken notice of this. The United States, I think, is in a place now that Hillary's going after Trump in her book and still going after him, calling him a clear and present danger. I think enough is enough. This is the largest unprosecuted fraud in history.
Give us a number.
Well, just the low estimate, 100 billion. But if you want to start talking about, how this mentality of fraud contributed to the stimulus program at 787 billion that doesn't seem to have worked, and nobody knows where the money went, or the the environmental programs, or various and sundry other initiatives at the UN, the World Bank, WHO. You want to start adding all that up, you're well into the trillions. So, and it's the mentality. There's a sort of, we've cast common sense to the wind. The idea that, you say that I'm involved in a globalist do-gooder project. What does that really mean? Around the world, there's 20 to 40 large economies in financial terms, 20 to 40 large markets. Most of the other countries are very, very small places. Why does it make sense to create some 200-person, conclave? And you notice the meetings for these things, they don't happen in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. I mean, in Geneva and Bali and Marrakesh, New York, Paris, London. Why go through all that? And why create these multilateral aid organizations where nobody checks the books? There is no regulator, and trillions of dollars flow around the world in these various schemes, and nobody actually checks to see who's really getting the money.
Now, let's keep in mind this: Haiti. How likely would it be for the Clintons to receive a standing ovation in Port-au-Prince or right now? They are livid. We never hear about this. They went through, they had, what, $10 billion? Who knows how much was raised for those who have suffered from this horrible disaster, the earthquake and everything. Did they ever, tell us about that, just as an example. Because, by the way, there's two parts of this. Number one, there is the crime, if you will, of, and it's not mere accounting irregularities, scrivener's error, or some type of pro forma. That is serious in and of itself. But compounding that, it's one thing if you say, listen, no, you know how they say in commercials, no animals were harmed during the making of this commercial. Well, if you're going to do a charitable fraud, you can say, look, nobody was hurt. I just kept the money. That's it. But let's talk about people who were hurt. The HIV, AIDS, watered-down drugs is a second part. But we just went through Irma. My family's in Florida. Friends I know. Thank God they dodged the proverbial bullet. So in our top-of-mind awareness right now is the idea of philanthropy and helping and being magnanimous and beneficent. And those poor people never got anything. And Hillary Clinton and the Clintons used this as a magnet, as the classic con to go in and raise. You know how you'll hear about somebody who raises money, a woman who claims she has cancer and doesn't, and she raises a couple of $100, and we're livid at that. Explain just a little bit, kind of an overview of just in terms of Haiti, that those poor people, how they were used as a front, kind of a Potemkin village, this Hollywood set, this front for this massive con.
Well, it's really a sad story. The first time I went to Africa was in I want to say 1975-6 time frame, and I was obviously much younger then, and I was told that in certain countries they really take a dim view of tourists taking pictures of these emaciated people, et cetera, because the argument is that you're stealing the soul of the person that you take a picture of. And I wonder if that wasn't really ancient wisdom, that they knew that, that picture would go back into a glossy annual fundraising appeal, and fraudsters, would do exactly what the Clintons have been doing. I mean, if you look at the cover of the Clinton glossy annual brochure, or for that matter, of many of these things that raise money, they always have a picture of a thin brown child, male or female, typically with flies buzzing around their heads. And, then this eloquent letter from some celebrity saying, if only we had, all you need to give us is $19 a day, and that's just one cup of Starbucks every 3 days, whatever the math is, and so unfortunately, as our population got richer and aged, we think nothing of signing up for these fundraising appeals, even if it's $1,000. Many people will just say, "Oh, fine, former presidents, they're teaming together. Of course, they're going to do the job right here." And so way too much money goes to the problem. And then, most of us are symmetrical. So we like thinking about symmetrical outcomes and symmetrical distributions. But the fact is, the distribution of wealth, the distribution of infrastructure around this world is asymmetrical and has been for a long time. So the infrastructure that you and I are using right now to do this and to beam around the place is not the same as exists in Haiti. If you or I were to get sick, the number of doctors and nurses and hospitals and roads and transportation systems, the electric current, all that, very different here than in Haiti. So when a natural disaster happens in Haiti, the last thing you should want to do first is put up a nice new luxury hotel so that, when Bill Clinton and his people go down there to pretend that they're doing good works, at least they can have a Laca Paca Frappuccino or whatever it is that they want to have in the coffee place. I mean, a country of Haiti, what it needs roads, it needs electricity, it needs clean water, it needs doctors who live there who are, good. It needs better nutrition. It needs food grown in their what used to be the rich soils of Haiti. It needs a new approach towards corruption, which is something that cannot be, litigated from external to the country. There would have to be a new realization that corruption is not the way we're going to work anymore. And that's a place. I mean, when Columbus got to the island that is now half Haiti, I mean, it was a thriving place in 1492. It had gold. It still has gold, And to think that Bill Clinton would team with a corrupt former leader of that country, starting in 2010, having been in Haiti, I think from the 70s, off and on. I forget if he went there on his honeymoon, but with Hillary. But they have a long-standing tie to Haiti. With all of the resources that the United States has, and then with all of the resources that he had teaming up with George W. Bush, all the reservoir of goodwill, the fact that inside this great country, there are many wonderful Haitians. I've come to know quite a few of them. And, that we couldn't, following that natural disaster, do right by the people of Haiti with what some people argue is $13 to $15 billion was raised to try to fix that place. It's still a shambles, and that there's no accounting for it, and that this family seriously believed that they could hide the truth. You talked about the Secret Server. There is something to be talked about.
Right. But still, though, but they took in more money. You told me this one. Tell me the stat. They took in more money than the accumulated actual total wealth of everybody in Haiti, or something along those lines.
The annual, they took in more money than the annual total population consumes for all uses in a year. They took in, some say, $13-15 billion, and the total consumption, rough numbers, was like $10 billion for the whole population. So you're talking $1,000 a person per year. That's what they're living on down in Haiti. And when you think about Haiti, you have to remember that the consumption is skewed. So the top 10% of the country probably eats 35-40% of the consumption. That means the bottom 90% has, call it 60-65% of the consumption. So you're talking, the bottom people are living on, $500 maybe a year. So, what is that? That's like $1 a day, $1.50 a day. And, don't tell me it's impossible to bring electricity to that island. Don't tell me it's impossible to, get good hospital care. Don't tell me you can't do good water treatment plants. Don't tell me you can't put roads down there. We're not talking about, Antarctica. We're not talking about the Sahara Desert. We're talking about...
When you go a little bit to the other side of the island and you see the Dominican Republic, that same piece of real estate, for some reason, they've been able, Charles, to really make some very nice. They have water, Wi-Fi, same real estate. So there's nothing inherent about that place. You can't say, well, you can't get there. Oh, yes, you can.
And the way I, was trained is sort of, you're given one task to do of low complexity and difficulty. And people would test and say, all right, Lionel, can you do this simple thing? And if you can do that simple thing, we'll give you a tougher thing, and then we'll give you multiple tougher things. If you cannot fix with, the amount of money that went towards Haiti, if you cannot fix Haiti as a former president of the United States in league with another former president of the United States, living in New York City, the world capital for the UN, basically, if you can't harness all of that to fix Haiti, why should anyone believe that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton can fix anything, let alone the United States of America, and let alone that Bill was going to, while Hillary was busy being president, Bill was going to reinvigorate the American economy the same way he did in Haiti. I mean, it really is time, I think, now to have some tough introspective moments here. Let's look back at this record. Now, Tom Fitton, I think, at Judicial Watch has coaxed 1,617 new pages out of that were hidden. And basically we know any new information that comes out will be more damaging than the last information, because this is the really damaging stuff that they've tried to hide for as long as possible. We really need to come together across the spectrum. And I know actually many progressive Democrats who are furious with the Clintons. Other Democrats should be furious with the Clintons and whoever else may be involved in this fraud. Let's get to the bottom of what really happened. let's comb through these emails all together. Let's follow this wherever it goes. If it goes to the Bush family, fine. If it goes, God forbid, to the Trumps, fine. Let's get to the bottom of this fraud in all of its stages and all of its elements around the world.
Bring us up to date. Whatever happened with the 30,000 emails? With that investigation? Is it just over? Is that just it? Did they just... Whatever... I mean, are we just moving on?
No, we're not just moving on. And I think Janine Pirro makes an excellent point in that opening that you can get to just by Googling. The real issue, the Clintons are experts at distraction. When a problem comes, they've had so many problems, they'll, look over here, right. Not over here. And so the whole issue of the number of the emails is a non-issue. The real issue is that, we learned last week, there's disclosures came out of a cause of action, an organization's lawsuit.
Right.
Got testimony under oath of an FBI agent that the whole lie, repeated lies told by Hillary herself and all of her surrogates during the primary campaign, this is part of a normal security review. It's not an investigation. No grand juries were seated. As everybody, all former secretaries of state, rubbish. This is testimony under penalties of perjury that real investigations into public corruption using the server involving Hillary Clinton's people were before a grand jury. Okay, so we found that out last week. And the real issue here is not simply that there were 33,000, whatever the number is. Hillary Clinton was the first Secretary of State to have a crooked foundation in such horrible position. They lied about the position of the foundation to Barack Obama's people in the Memorandum of Understanding. First person to be directly affiliated with a running crooked foundation while at the same time being Secretary of State. A crooked foundation that was soliciting money, elects to have all of her emails run under her control through a secret server in a secret set of offices. We do not yet know all the offices where they may have been doing this. One at 77 Water Street, it came out through the WikiLeaks Podesta dump. We don't know if that's the only secret office. There may be one secret office internationally. Maybe Ira Magaziner has a secret office. Who knows how many secret offices there are? She's the first person to ever take the property of the United States, this valuable intellectual property, house it in secret server and secret offices, and then walk out the front door on February 1st, 2013, holding on to this property all the way until 2015. It's outrageous, while she was fundraising. I mean, that's the real story here. And think of the number of people inside the Obama administration who knew this, including possibly and probably Barack Obama himself. Why did he tolerate this? Is it because he thought, well, she's going to win, she's going to get away with this, we'll see what she does with Bill, and then in my post-presidency, I'll take the Clinton practices to galactic level. Is that the deal here?
Recently, I was watching the Steve Bannon interview, the entire interview with Charlie Rose. Very interesting. And in one of the portions of this, Charles, Bannon said, you have to understand Hillary Clinton when it comes to pay for play. He said for the first time ever, when Kerry and even Obama said, okay, you'll be Secretary of State, but you're going to sign something that says you're not going to engage in any kind of a fundraising or speeches or whatever until you approve us. Nobody had ever done this before. They knew, and Bannon's at least public impression was that Obama's really not into venal, base corruption. He's not into the bucks. Well, that's what he said. There is something, and I think this is important. You have to sit back and look at the personality here. It's almost like, when you're doing a serial killer, you want to say, give me a profile. Who is this person? This is a woman, this is a man. And I think it's more, maybe I'm incorrect, I think it's more her than Bill. Bill's a pretty slimy guy. His are more physical, more basic and immediate. She is the psychopathic greed. Anybody would be so happy with what they've done. They are set for lifetimes. Their daughter, their grandchild. more than they could very well be billionaires. We don't know anything. And anybody else would say, if I represented you, if I said, Charles, let's assume, God forbid, you were Hillary, I'm going to say, look, here's what you're going to do. You're going to lay low for a while. You're going to go to a monastery. You're going to move away. You're going to reframe, retool. Don't write what happened. Stop complaining. Look who this person is. You have to understand her before you understand the complexity and the motivation, because most people are saying, why would somebody be that stupid? You have to understand what motivates her. There was, number one, a sense of entitlement. Number two, a sense of impenetrability, that she's cloaked with some kind of a judicial Kevlar or something. Nothing. It's like Leona Helmsley said, poor people pay taxes. I'm Hillary Clinton. Nothing is enough. She lost the election. She can go back, regroup, sit back, wait. Even if it killed her, she can't let it go. She is collapsing whatever's left of the DNC. This is who she is. This is who they are. I can't say it enough. We're not talking about Jim Wright corruption. Remember him? He sold some books and people. This is over the top, and it continues. And the more you stop it, the more the waters rise, and she keeps coming after you. Nothing scares her, Charles. Nothing says, whoa, you know what? Ortel's on me. That's it. Time out. I'm getting out of here. Let the attention, the Americans have the attention span of a gnat. Does that ever cause you just to stop and just hold in awe the evil, for lack of a better word, of Hillary Clinton? This is a unique personality.
Well, one of the people I've encountered just through studying, and obviously this person's long dead, who truly was a genius, who actually had problems with corruption, was Francis Bacon back in the 16th century. And he, among his many pithy quotes, one is something like, you need darkness to see the light. And you need this dark example to see why charities can be abused, and to understand that the regulatory apparatus inside this country and around the world needs now to be tightened dramatically, moved into the 21st century. And, when I realized, again, had this been narrowly about politics, I wouldn't have been involved. Had this been narrowly about business, I wouldn't have been involved. But this world of charitable endeavors is actually a global endeavor. And in particularly, it's the money is being taken from the small number of rich countries and theories.
But let me just say something. Every time we've spoken, every time either here or interviews or on YouTube or just speaking, chatting socially, invariably, you've always talked about the internal, the moral disgust that you feel. Philanthropy and charities mean a lot to you. You always say this, and I always ask when somebody, or when you're interviewing somebody and like a witness or whatever, and they keep saying the same thing. There is something to this. It infuriates you. If it was plain old, put it this way, Bernie Madoff, I got it. Bank robbers, Willie Sutton, I got it. Understand it. This affects you even more. What, without not going into your psyche, but what is this? This I think I find fascinating about you. This kills you. It enrages you. Why?
Well, because I've had the fortune of being able to study this area for a while, and people involved with it going way back into history, and way back into modern human history. By that I mean 600 AD forward. And certainly perhaps well before then. Fortunate people, and even people who didn't have that much by way of money, set up organizations, institutions, in the hope that these institutions would last forever and would be engaged in doing good works. And they were genuine. Some had been, warrior kings, and they were trying to atone at the last minute and hope they'd get on the right escalator up to heaven. But there are many good examples of fine institutions that have been entrusted with money for the care and taking on of charitable purposes. And for that reason, given that history, many of us revere those who would stand up and say, I'm a philanthropist, like the Clintons or like Bill Gates or whatever. And so when you see smart people, we can't say the Clintons are stupid. When we see smart people raping and pillaging, it takes a pillage, is basically the motto of the and getting away with it and thinking that they can run and actually running and now complaining about having lost again an election.
Well, see, that goes back to my thing. That's the psycho. See, you have that's her thing. That is one of the elements of the psychopath, the inability to appreciate consequence and the ability to take blame. It's very, very simple. Let me ask something before I forget. One time you made a very interesting distinction. You said there are two kinds of charities. There's one kind of charity is like a 501c3, and then there's one where you stand almost in place of the government, or you made a very interesting distinction. Do you recall this? And I'm not as up. You should be doing a horn book for law school classes on charities. But what was it that you said about how they stand in place in like loco parentis in loco government?
Sure. So all charities are what is called, I think all charities are private foundations, like the Bill and Melinda Gates, but some of them, like the Clinton Foundation, are public charities. And public charities stand in the shoes of government. They're basically organizations that cannot, Lionel and Charles can't set up the Lionel and Charles public charity that only allows members of our family to be on control of the board of directors. You just can't do that. We're actually performing tasks. We're lessening the burdens of government. We're doing it in a way that is broadly supported by the public. And that important distinction, there's actually a monetary distinction. A private charity that is not broadly supported can only offer its donors a smaller percentage contribution deduction. In other words, I think it's, from memory served, at the federal level, it's up to 30% of your pre-tax income can be deducted if it's a private, but if it's a public charity, up to 50. So there's a monetary distinction and benefit from operating a public charity. But to be a public charity, you actually have to stand in the shoes of government. You have to make sure that your trustees are independent, truly independent. They can't be, only Lionel's campaign group are the trustees, the way that the Clinton Foundation was operated until 2013. Can't do that.
I'm sorry, what is a 501c3? Oh, I'm sorry, let me do it.
Yeah. So a 501c3 is a broad category of charities that includes public charities. Okay, and then you can have I forget the actual code section for a private foundation. It might be 509A1 or something, but I forget the exact one. But if I just may make one other point, sure. In the case of a public charity, the trustees absolutely have three legal duties. They have a duty of care. It is they have to exercise the amount of time and attention. They have to familiarize themselves with the situation of the charity. They have to investigate, make sure they're fully up to date, and taking prudent care of the affairs of this charity. They have a duty of obedience to all law. It's not like laws are a suggestion when you're a trustee of a charity, as I told indirectly by the Clinton Foundation. These are just suggestions. Right. They're not. No, they're laws, and a charity cannot break any law, any state, federal, foreign law. You can't do that. And lastly, duty of loyalty. That means that in the event of a conflict between your interests and the charity's interests, you have to set your interests aside. You have to declare your interests so people understand them. And it may be that you can't vote on a matter of crucial importance to the charity, but at all times when you think through what's going on with the charity, you've got to understand that your first loyalty, your highest loyalty, is to the charity. This is a case study in the gross and reckless and willful disgust for these rules. I mean, this is, you can look at this Clinton Foundation record, and if you wanted to use it, you could teach people how to actually run a charity by saying, everything that they did,
right,
do the opposite, and you may have gotten it right. But don't do anything they did, because their whole record is a case study in flagrant, as yet, unprosecuted
And
fraud.
See, I'm glad you said that. There's no such thing as, through years of tedious unraveling, Charles Ortel, working in the dusty bowels of libraries, unraveling, untangling this Gordian knot of hidden... No! Start up. No audit. Wait a minute. Your billing statement would be 20 seconds. I'm done. No audit. Thank you. That's it. Right off the bat, there should be red flags, and I mean just everybody who has ever been examined, everybody who's ever had some felt the wrath of some red tape morass, some quicksand. Just how the hell did I get, some weird zoning problem? Anytime anybody has ever been involved with the government, local or otherwise, my God, what did I do? Why am I considered public enemy number one? Not even an audit. And let me also say something. Last week, Loomer, or whatever her name was, she goes downtown to Barnes & Noble, where Hillary Clinton is there, late, by the way, late to her book signing, where apparently a bunch of lobotomized, mindless dupes were waiting online for hours to meet this pant-suited harridan, this termagant of the first stripe. And this Loomer, whatever her name is, she decides to go and do some guerrilla ambush journalism and says, hey, what about Seth Rich? What about this? What about the servers? What about... And people are saying, oh, Lowdy, get her out. And at first I thought to myself, isn't it sad that instead of saying, whoa, wait a minute, what is she talking about? They're saying, isn't it horrible the way she interrupted that woman's book signing? The media, the days of Woodward and Bernstein, which is another story, nobody cares about this. The whole Seth Rich thing, I mean, you care about it, we care about it, I care about it. But it seems like it's somewhere at CNN, there's like an unwritten rule somewhere. Don't you even think about bringing this up. Don't you even report on it? Doesn't it just not, again, adding to your level of disgust, just make you wonder, thank God there are at least these individuals who are trying to expose something.
So I've had actually the great good fortune through this process to, I think, see tremendous opportunity out of all this. After all, I met you and others like you, and I think you and others are doing the work and have been doing the work that the mainstream media isn't doing and won't do, because the mainstream business model is to basically create infomercials for advertisers who are an ever-dwindling pile of money, incoming money to the mainstream media. So this creates an opportunity. What I'm seeing, and actually what we've just been talking about, is not something you can cover, on television that easily, because you're constantly interrupted by commercials. You got maybe what we were talking about might displease, the biggest donors, in an election year, which happened to be the Democratic and Republican Party. So, I mean, out of all this, what we're seeing is that the mainstream model is irrelevant for many reasons. It takes too long. The editorial filter is too corrupted by commercial considerations, in my view. After all, you got Carlos Slim at the New York Times, who I think is the largest independent source of potential money for the failing New York Times. Are you really going to do a story investigating Carlos Slim's connections, which are legendary, to the Clinton Foundation? I don't think so. So what we're seeing through all this is, first of all, an opportunity for you and for me and others. And what I've been seeing, believe it or not, in this 2-year period, though I am on the conservative media a lot, I'd say a majority of my time is spent on either progressive or foreign media. And I think through that experience, I'm beginning to learn more about a different end of the spectrum than I patrol in. And I think we're beginning to see a lot of common ground, that people on the right and the left are dissatisfied with the uniparty. We're dissatisfied with crony capitalism. We're dissatisfied with the deep state approach. We're dissatisfied with a system that doesn't allow or encourage companies to provide decent wages, growing wages, fair benefits. And we're seeing, I think, some common interests. And we're not falling prey to the game, which was to set one group against another group to distract the entire group from the fraud.
This past week, speaking of Carlos Slim in the New York Times, there was this attempted hit piece, I guess, on RT and Sputnik. Russia Television, or Russia Today, rather, and Sputnik, which is a radio version of it. Written by the New York Times owned by Carlos Slim, as far as foreign or whatever ownership of a media. And at one particular point, they said something to the effect of, and I forget what it was, and there's Russia daring to involve itself in war games on NATO's border. When you read that, and I'm saying this got past an editor, NATO's border, it's their border. All right. The irony, the cojones, the elephantine huevos, to be able to sit there and say, you, the New York Times, the ones vaunted and heralded, the gray old lady, and all the news that fit to print, are basically acting as the apparatchik, I guess the media arm of whatever deep state or hidden government, whatever it is, for you to even complain against any media outlet, any, irrespective of that, but you. And the only place you go to hear anything about this is alternative or foreign media. You don't, I mean, even with all due respect to Fox, God bless them, there's also a certain, their firewall might be a little lower, but there's a firewall too. You don't go to, especially now with the new ownership, with the Murdoch boys trying to sell Sky and trying to tell everybody, hey, listen, because God knows Tony Blair and his friends who are involved in that particular thing. But the thing is that even the hubris of these people, actually, because the only place you're going to hear this is those particular outlets, you and me and elsewhere, and the rest of the world. That's the part, because it's one example of audacity after another. Hillary and her audacity, her absolute inability to conform with the law, so blatantly still blaming people. And then the New York Times, rather than saying, look, let's just back up here. We are selling off floors of our 8th Avenue. Now's not the time. They double down, of all places. And it's a foreign enemy, whatever, pravdatas, whatever version you want. I mean, it just, as you can see, I'm visibly shaken, for good reason, but it's just mind-boggling, the audacity, the hubris of these people.
I very much did notice that. And in part because what they were talking about is, I think, the potential failure or alleged failure of elements, I think, of Sputnik and possibly RT to register under what is called the Foreign Agents Registration Act that was, I believe, established around 1938. And they have prosecuted people for violations of that, but they really haven't gone as far as they might. And that act, I've read it carefully, it doesn't deal only with foreign governments. It deals with foreign governments, with foreign political parties, but most importantly, as you say, it deals with foreign-controlled corporations. And there are definitions that might get to Mr. Slim, and certainly in the case of foundations and a lot of other operations that are on both sides, Republican and Democrat. If you really want
media, but media is a different category as well. But aside from that, this is the part where every time, I'm sure you have these friends of yours, us being in this grand city, known for its proverbial limousine liberals in Upper West Side, and I don't even consider myself a conservative or anything. I'm just a common sense, I'm a real truther. I want the truth and everything. But I have these friends of mine, and I'm sure you have them as well, who says, there you go again. What is with you and Hillary Clinton? The election's over, Charles. Leave this hate alone. Why do you what is this? Is this your white whale? What are you, Ahab? What is this? And I'm thinking, you just don't get it. When people were saying, actually refusing to even so much as acknowledge that Bill Clinton had multiple claims of allegations about his sexual predation and the like, they refocused the concern, like, what is the matter with you? Why are you doing this? And I thought, this is not even a political issue. It's almost like it's like Yankees Red Sox or something. It's a team thing, or people have converted into something like, it's not that we love Hillary, it's that we hate people who hate Hillary. If that makes any sense.
Well, I love, I have a lot of free time and not much to do with it. And so one of the things I do is I get deeply into the weeds in data. And there are some excellent tables, the National Income and Product Account tables, specifically I think it's Section 3, that goes into great depth in explaining just how much money we spend on government. And this data goes all the way back on a consistent basis to 1929. But if you focus in on the period 1989 to the present, most of us will forget that back in 1989, prior to 92, the United States military budget was very big in relation to the non-military budget. When you go back into the time series from that period forward, 1989 to the present, non-military spending, all in, federal, state, and local, is vast. There was a story last week, I think, about the size of the federal debt. That doesn't even get into the total debt of this country. The threats posed to human labor by technology and machines, very different in 2017. The notion that we would put in place a corrupt team of grifters that is still thinking that they can manipulate Donald Trump and outfox him and maybe get to a place where they impeach him and then they put her back in 2020. The notion that that team would sit on top as the corpulent leeches they've become and insert themselves into this failing system that has been failing, I would argue, since about 1998 or so under both parties, and not do the work that could be done to save the patient, streamline the size of government, change the business model of government, change the approach taken in the tax system, to change the approach to maybe figure out how we could forge a better pact of peace around the world so we don't need to spend as much money as we've been spending. The notion that you, instead of doing that you could, take what Obama did for the last 8 years and then Bush, you can rate him however you want, and then with Clinton for 24 years of, living at what was that movie about, the Grand Bouffe, the big, buffet or whatever in France. You'll live in this ridiculous situation where no amount of money is too big to spend on the silliest of all projects. We couldn't let that happen, and so I'm glad it didn't happen. And now in the aftermath of the election, I think it's crucially important. Donald Trump, 9 months, he's coming up on 9 months. I mean, the baby I think materializes after 9 months. A lot can happen in 9 months. Let's hope this baby learns how to walk very quickly and turns its attention now to actually delivering for us. And let's hope the American people see the benefit soon of these changes. And let's hope that we find our feet because, we're living in a horrible place. It's not like we're winning around the world in these various battles. A lot of blood has been spilled. A lot of people return home.
Hear, 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 hear. Very, very excellent. Charles Ortel, when will you run for office, and how can we set up a public foundation? No, you like Steve Bannon. I was just listening to him for the first. I never heard the entire Charlie Rose. It's a big interview, and the way he was portrayed as this gruff, horrid, brilliant, and. It goes back to, and I'll just leave it with this. You have your notion of philanthropy and charity, and that's your thing. I have this, there's this wonderful, inherent, beautiful thing about this country, theoretically. It's equal protection under the law, the Equal Protection Clause, the Supreme Court. We had this idea of ballot. Everybody's treated the same. Everybody, both in terms of defense and prosecution. You do something wrong, doesn't matter who you are. We can't treat you differently. And it permeates everything from gay marriage to this and that, but it also means that you cannot get away. This is not a monarchy. We don't live in a caste system. You're not an untouchable. It doesn't work that way. And Hillary Clinton reminds me, she's like the canary in the coal mine. As long as that canary, I don't know what the reverse of that is, doesn't die, does die. But as long as Hillary Clinton, look, I don't want to put her in prison. If you want to say, look, here's the deal, Ortel, I'll make a deal with you. We'll just fine her or something. I don't care. Put her in prison. Fine, don't. Charge her with something. I want her in the dock. I want her and those responsible to enter a plea, whether it's a federal misdemeanor or not. I don't care. Just so we can say, you did it. Gotcha. That's it. Because everybody says, Hillary in prison, put her in prison. Okay, if that's not possible, though I do not necessarily think that would not be perhaps some kind of weird psychic justice porn, but just something, anything, then I would be somewhat happy.
Well, if we think about the fact that Martha Stewart did go to prison, right? Now, Martha Stewart has her friends and her detractors, but she did actually go to prison for a lot smaller crime. And I actually am interested in two things. I'm first of all interested, and I'll give free advice to the audience, to the Clintons. The smartest thing you could do right now, if you listen to this broadcast, go into an independent law firm and appoint a conservator to sit over all of these charities and stop raising money. That's the smartest thing you can do. Each moment that they continue raising money, given this track record, only compounds the ultimate penalties that they're going to face here, which could be ruin, not simply for every member of the Clinton family, all the trustees, but for the significant donors who, like the Bill Gates Foundation has given, I think, over 100 separate gifts to this set of frauds. I mean, an argument could be made that, let's just say, an IRS that needs to plug a budget gap, for the country, could take a look at the Bill Gates Foundation and say, with this record, and there are other problems with the Gates Foundation, actually, we're going to shut you down and present you with a bill. And fortunately, you've got $44 billion or whatever is in the accounts of the Gates Foundation. Thank you very much. Just wire that down to the Treasury. There's $44 billion to plug some of it. And just go. Robert Wood Johnson, Rockefeller, the big foundations that have contributed to this inside and outside the country. I mean, you sit at this, and there's a tremendous piggy bank here of repetitive bad behavior. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, all these big institutions have one way or another contributed to, profited from this ongoing unprosecuted fraud. So I'd like to see the full extent of it known, all right? Conservative first, what really happened, show us the real books and records, what are all the related party gains here, let's tax all of those. And there you're sitting on this gigantic windfall that could be used for good work to reduce our national debt, could send a message that smart people who do this kind of stuff will pay a heavy price. And then with that fully known, with the full extent known, that's when I think the public will put enormous pressure on the prosecutors to actually lay down the kind of sentences that could result in lifetime jail sentences.
Well, let us hope. Charles Ortel, thank you. You have been just magnificent. Per usual, I say. Per usual. This might be your best ever, and that's a tough one. CharlesOrtel.com. If you were to advise our legions of viewers where they can go, you again are at CharlesOrtel.com, where you have just a tremendous repository and library of all that you've done that will get them. Any other sites or places you can direct the audience?
There's my Twitter is at Charles Ortel, but I've been doing this show Sunday with Charles, which actually I'm going to do in a few minutes, with Crowdsource the Truth, and that's on YouTube. So I'm doing that once a week to step up the.
Is that our good friend Jason? Our good friend Mr.
Goodman? Mr. Jason, or as I call him, Jason Sonaboni.
Yeah, they're a great man, a great team. Wonderful. We will do that. In fact, I will just make sure I will always provide those links as well. Charles Ortel, thank you so very much. You are seriously. I'm so glad to know you. So glad we're friends, but so proud that there's somebody out there getting to the bottom of something that needs so much attention. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Lon.
Have a great day.